It was only 4 years ago that Donald Trump was painting his then opponent, Joe Biden, as a weak-old candidate who was too afraid to leave his basement.
We have a sleepy guy in a basement of a house that the press is giving a free pass to.
We have a guy that doesn't come out of his basement.
Joe Biden is sleeping or whatever he's doing in his basement. He doesn't seem to come out a lot.
He's waved a white flag on life. He doesn't leave his basement.
Now the script is flipped. In 2024, Biden is out of the race and Trump is the old, exhausted candidate afraid to leave his safe spaces. According to Politico, an advisor to Trump told producers of the Shade Room podcast that Trump was, quote, exhausted and refusing some interviews, but that could change. Trump's exhaustion was on display this week at a rally last night in Michigan. His microphone cut out 10 minutes into his speech, which prompted him to bizarrely wander the stage for nearly 20 minutes, occasionally talking with technical staff and supporters. It was even more awkward on Monday in Pennsylvania. Two attendees fainted due to the heat. After the second collapse, Trump made a remark about, wait for it, losing weight. He then paused for a Q&A session with Governor Kristi Noem and shifted to playing music for nearly 40 minutes. His antics providing lines of attacks for Democrats, including Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Obama.
He's ducking debates and canceling interviews because of exhaustion. Have you noticed he tends to go off script and ramble? And generally, for the life of him, cannot finish a thought.
You would be worried if your grandpa was acting like this.
Now, Trump's exhaustion can be seen in his interview schedule or lack thereof. The once media-obsessed Trump seems to keep canceling interviews and events. In the past week, he has canceled interviews on 60 Minutes, CNBC, NBC News, the Shade Room podcast, and even, believe it or not, a scheduled NRA event. Yes, the NRA. Instead, Trump is isolated in his right-wing media bubble, retreating to softball interviews. That includes a Fox town hall that was ostensibly meant to feature Trump speaking with women voters. There's now reporting that the room was actually filled with Republican supporters. Now, considering all the rambling, incoherent things Trump has said this week, it's easy to understand why he's staying inside this safe bubble.
I was so amazed that Harvey Weinstein got schlonged. Lincoln was probably a great president, although I've always said, why wasn't that settled? You know, I'm a guy that it doesn't make sense. We had a civil war. I love cows, but if we go with Kamala, you won't have any cows anymore. This one here, Kamala.
Trump's incoherence and cognitive decline on further display Friday in Detroit. Remember all those interviews we mentioned that Trump had canceled? Listen to what he told a reporter just yesterday.
Kamala Harris said she thinks you're exhausted. That's why you're canceling events. Are you exhausted?
What event have I canceled? I haven't canceled. She doesn't go to any events.
She doesn't go to any events. Today alone, we saw the vice president in Michigan doing a rally with Lizzo in Detroit. Tonight, she's in Atlanta with Usher. Not to mention, Harris has continued her media blitz since going into unfriendly territory this week with Fox's Bret Baier. And Harris is reportedly considering going on Joe Rogan's podcast, who has been a harsh critic of hers. So to be blunt here, Donald Trump has lost the plot and is a shadow of the candidate he was 4 years ago. With just 17 days until the election, the man who once prided himself as full of energy is now clearly hiding in his basement. We have an all-star panel kicking us off. Paula Ramos, MSNBC contributor and author of the new book, Defectors, The Rise of the Latino Far Right and What It Means for America. Hayes Brown, MSNBC Daily writer and editor. And Tim O'Brien, MSNBC political analyst, Bloomberg Opinion senior executive editor, and author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. So, we'll start with everyone around the table. Has this guy lost the plot? I mean, is he absolutely bonkers right now?
So I think I may disappoint you. I think that on the surface, yes, right on the surface, we're seeing someone that is unhinged, tired, that is hiding. But I think that's precisely the danger of Donald Trump, right? Because the biggest weapon that he has isn't his appearance. It's what we don't see. It's the danger of the ideology. And perhaps they're entering a stage in the campaign where they get to take a step back, cross their arms, and see the Trump machine doing what it does really well through that fear. They've already been doing this groundwork since 2016, right? They already know that the majority of Republicans don't believe that Biden is a president. They already know that they have fundamentally shifted this country to the right on immigration. They already have scared people to the point that they literally believe that there's an invasion of the southern border. So now the machine does what it does. And you don't really need Donald Trump to do that. That's the ideology doing the work.
Okay. Hayes.
Sorry.
No, that's exactly. I mean,
I completely.
I think that's the very kind of smart intellectual answer, and I think you're right about all the points that you raised, which is he is this threat. He has this machine behind him that he has created, and in that bubble in which that machine is operating, has he now become irrelevant, and has he become, because of the fatigue and the exhaustion, become this kind of ridiculed caricature?
Yes, in a way, and it's really bad for him considering the fact that he's the one who, when Lara Trump took over the RNC, was like, scrap the ground game. We don't need that. We don't need to worry about getting the vote. I am the best person out there to get our supporters out to the polls, to get them riled up and ready to go. He's canceling events. He's rambling on the stump. He's got people who are in the audience who are there to support him feeling like, oh, what on earth is he talking about? Now, I have ADHD, so my brain, it's easy to jump from topic to topic. And I've been watching Trump a long time. I know the cast of characters and the beats he has. Yeah. Even then, a lot of the time I can get lost. And I think what's less important than him going off on tangents is how often these days he's looping back around to his original point. That is something we're seeing less and less of.
So what do you make of it, Tim? I mean, joking aside here, because at the end of the day, in order for his threat to be as serious as it should be, he needs to win. And he can't win if he looks like a buffoon or a bumbling idiot. I mean,
well, unfortunately, he could win.
He could win,
being a buffoon and a bumbling idiot. Yeah. I mean, that is part of what I think Paula put her finger on. That the danger in all of this is that the bumbling and the idiocy and the irrationality are okay with, at least half of the Republican base, more or less, and that this election might just turn on this, block of moderate and independent voters who have had enough with that. Clearly, Democrats have. Enough Republicans are willing to absorb it. Yeah. And so it's going to come down on November 5th to people deciding whether or not they want someone who is utterly unhinged with his finger on the nuclear button. But I think the other thing that's really important, what Paula said, is that to a certain extent, Trump has always been this way. He is ignorant. He's a racist. He's irrational. He's a flamethrower. He goes at people emotionally, not intellectually. And he's been that way his whole life. I think what we've seen since 2020 is he is degrading. His speech is slurring. His mind is slower. He is tired at the end of the day. He loses the plot. He loses the narrative. He loses his train of thought. And he's dangerous. And he's not fit to occupy the Oval Office.
So you bring up a really good time for me to play this out, and I'll get your reaction to it. Take a listen.
Should Google be broken up?
I just haven't gotten over something the Justice Department did yesterday, where Virginia cleaned up its voter rolls and got rid of thousands and thousands of bad votes, and the Justice Department sued them that they should be allowed to put those bad votes and illegal votes back in and let the people vote. So I haven't gotten over that. A lot of people have seen that. They can't even believe it.
The question is about Google, President Trump.
Again, the question was about should Google be broken up, and he goes off on a tangent. And it's, again, this indication of the mental decline that he is going through. But it seems I don't even know if his supporters see those clips, right? Like it just does not enter into their siloed stream of information, so they probably won't see it.
Right, but that's the clip that the Harris campaign wants everyone to see. And that's where you see the campaign really transforming their message. Right. It used to be about casting Donald Trump as a threat because of his authoritarian tendencies, and that message was a little bit more abstract, a little bit less palpable, and now the message is very clear. Literally, this man can't even answer a question, and that is something that I think a lot of Americans can really relate to. To Barack Obama's point, it's a version of Trump that is, what did he say, a crazier, loonier, older version of Trump, and people can relate to that. So that's exactly the clip that they're really relying on.
So, but even in those moments, Tim, he still is revealing the authoritarian tendencies when he's calling people enemy within, when he's saying that these immigrants are poisoning our blood, when he's saying, what should happen with the generals. I mean, these are the things that ultimately break through to his base. It's not this stuff.
But that is a bonkers political strategy.
Right.
And he's not, anytime there's the word strategies in the same sentence as Donald Trump, it's a mistake. But he doesn't need to do anything more for his base. His base is with him regardless of what he's going to do. He needs, I think, to convince, again, this middle swath that he's a rational actor, and he's not. And every time he's had an opportunity to do it, whether he was debating Kamala Harris or talking to John Micklethwait on a stage in Chicago, where the script should be about being rational, being in command of the facts, he doesn't do it. In part because he's not capable of doing it, but also because he doesn't want to, and it's driving his own campaign managers bonkers. And this is what you're going to see now up until November 5th. He is baked into saying, I am going to be about being an authoritarian. I'm going to be about abusing the law. I'm going to be about undermining American institutions and civility. And I'm going to take that to November 5th. And that's what's going to get tested.